This week, Kumar and I continued to work through Kentaro Miura's manga Berserk with volumes 7 and 8, as we see Griffith make considerable progress toward his dream of having his own kingdom. Does Casca see him in a romantic light or as a father figure? And what will Guts do as he steps out from Griffith's shadow? We hope you'll spread the word about Deconstructing Comics. Tell your friends about us, share episodes on social media, and also send us suggestions for topics we could cover. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. Hello, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
All right. So this is the first episode of the new year. Actually, although the second episode of the new year is already recorded because I didn't know it was coming and it dropped.
Oh, okay.
Kumar dropped it in my Skype yesterday and I had already teased this one. So here on December 29th, 2023, we're recording the first 2024 episode. And it's...
how many years has the podcast been going? Since 2000?
Well, let's see, 2005, December 2005.
Wow,
so,
okay.
Yeah, we're at 18 years now.
Holy moly.
Going into our 19th year. Jeez.
Wow.
And we still don't have any listeners. Well, we have some, but we need help. But we just keep doing it because we can't stop. And we want to talk about comics, and so we might as well record it and put it out for other people to listen to. So
that's my attitude.
And so we are continuing our walk through Berserk, the manga by, I forgot to put the author's name in my notes, Miura. Kentaro Miura.
And I think we're because we're doing 7 and 8. I think there are currently 40, so we're like a fifth of the way through. It seems impossible, but I guess it must be true. I don't know how many more are going to come. But.
Well, yeah, and I don't know how much longer this flashback is going to last either. So, it started mid-volume 3, and
I think you said it ran for 14 volumes or something.
Yeah, I don't remember now, but yeah, I'm sure there's much more of this flashback to come. I mean, those first 2.5 volumes, the stuff with Puck the elf, it seems like it was a completely different series.
Yeah, well, yes. This came up last time when we recorded on 5 and 6. We were like, there was only one magical incident, and in 5 and 6, there was only one magical thing that happened, this kind of demon thing that showed up that they had to fight. And this time, there was only one mention of elf dust.
Yeah. Oh, elves. Used. Elves still already exist in this flashback.
They're not even... Yeah, but they just talked about in a further flashback. It's like, I bought this from a nice elf or something. It's elf dust. It's for healing. And also, there's this big battle, and then you see this kind of demon-looking character looking up at the sky at the end of it. And that's it. And we don't know who that guy is or anything. But there's even less magic in 7 and 8 than there was in 5 and 6, which I thought after 5 and 6, I said, in that episode, I said, well, we have to ramp back up to the world of 1, 2, and 3, because those volumes were chock full of demons, ghosts, all sorts of stuff like that. And in fact, seem to be going even further and further, and there's less and less of any of that kind of stuff.
Well, that demon you're talking about, I blanked on him too, but that was Nosferatu Zod. In his like non-demon form kind, or remember he changes and he has the big horns. But I was just remembering the horns version. But that's what he looked like when he first started fighting Guts in the previous 2 volumes.
So we can even scratch him out then as a new supernatural thing that happens here. He's just the same guy again.
Right. And actually, while we're on that topic, and I had a little trouble understanding what was going on there, and I was looking around at conversation on the web, but Zod throws a sword to Guts when Guts' sword is broken.
Oh.
And as was discussed on some message board, I don't remember what it was now, the idea was that, remember, Guts gave Zod a much better fight than he ever got from anybody else, and Zod wants to do that again. So he didn't want Guts to fail in this battle so that he would still be alive, that he could give Zod another good fight.
Oh, okay. Because there was a scene at the end of that big battle. We're jumping all over the place, but he sees that sword that looks like a saw sitting on the roof of the castle, and he's like, "It can't be." And I'm like, "I don't get it. What is that?"
There's a panel where, and it's a little hard to tell what's going on, but it's a really dramatic panel where the sword is thrown by Zod, who's off in the distance, and it's just spinning in the air, and then it lands in front of Guts.
Right.
But I had a little trouble following that also.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, I think Miura's art, it can be really dramatic and sometimes kind of breathtaking, but at the same time, it can be a little hard to follow sometimes.
A little bit, but I actually found that these two volumes were kind of a return to form, because I found in volumes 5 and 6 the combat, which is maybe one of the highlights of the series, became harder to follow in 5 and 6 because there weren't any demons or monsters. It was just guys in different armor, and you had to keep track of, like, what does this guy's armor look like? Who's that guy? To find out who is fighting who or stuff like that. And I found here we've returned to the gore fest of the earlier volumes.
People getting sliced in half.
People getting sliced in half and their heads chopped off, and just rivers of blood shooting out of them. But the choreography of the fights was really good. And something I really noticed this time was when he gets into combat mode, Miura splits panels into split seconds. Like, really, like, there's a scene where where I think Griffith's about to stab a guy in the eye, and you get him grabbing the shard of wood, and then a panel of him swinging it, and then it going into the eye. And any other cartoonist, you only need 2 panels to do that, really. You don't need to show the mid-swing. But he shows you that swing. And, there's another one where, like, Griffith is poisoned, and it's somebody's in mid-speech bubble where they're about to say Griffith. I think it's Casca's about to say Griffith, and it's cut off before she can even finish the word before he falls over. And I thought those split moments were really great and helped the choreography of this, despite this stuff about having trouble following what was going on with the sword and stuff. The kind of micro choreography of the battles was really good in these 2 volumes, I thought.
Mm-hmm. I did some bullet points on these 2 volumes. I thought rather than going blow by blow through the whole thing and turn this into a 2-parter, I thought, well, the main theme of these 2 volumes is Griffith's dream of, he wants more and more power, he wants his own kingdom, and what he's doing to reach that goal, and the progress. He makes a lot of progress in these 2 volumes.
Yeah, definitely.
And early on, we're picking up where we left off last time, where Casca was having her period, but she still went into battle, and she fainted, and she fell off a cliff, and Guts dove after her, and now they're down below this cliff, and
they're in like a cave or something.
Recovering, in this cave. Yeah. And she tells him about how she saw that Griffith had prostituted himself to this creepy pedophile guy. We later find out his name is Ganon. And it would just the purpose was just to make money for advancing his dream.
So before this, we get a scene where there's been a battle, and this little boy who was one of the Band of the Hawk, like he was a member, he died. So they find his dead body on the battlefield, and he's clutching a little toy knight figurine. Mm-hmm. So I guess the idea is that this little kid really wanted to be a soldier, and then he went into an actual battle with the Band of the Hawk, and then he got killed. And he's like 9 or 10 years old or something. Now, to me, I thought the scene was a little bit ridiculous. I found it hard to believe that a kid that was still playing with toys would be in an actual combat.
Yeah, and expected to be able to survive it.
Yeah, and I was like, what is this? It's a very weird thing. But then it's kind of implied, or at least Casca assumes that Griffith feels that he doesn't want to lose. He can go into 10 battles and make a certain amount of money, but then all these troops will be killed. And maybe he thinks of this because of the death of the little boy. He denies that, but that's what Casca thinks. Yeah. Because of the little boy. But then, so he decides, well, I'm going to just get all the money all in one fell swoop, and he seduces this old man who he knows has a thing for young virginal boys, which is what Griffith looks like at this stage of his life. So that's how we get to that stage. But I have to say, at this point, there's a lot of talk about dreams in this chapter, and how Casca wants to be the sword that helps Griffith achieve his dream. And it's all very wishy-washy. And we had this problem last volume too, where they were talking about what does friendship mean, and the words were all very vague and poetic, and maybe it sounds good in Japanese, but in the translation, it's like, what are you actually talking about? And what is this dream exactly? And I feel like Miura's trying to maybe depict the kind of psychology of someone like a Alexander the Great or a Genghis Khan, or somebody who becomes a massive conqueror, and what kind of person is that? And Griffith is who that's supposed to be. But I think somehow either the way it's written, the way it's translated, it's not amounting to much. It's just talking about he has a dream, and she says it's not that he is strong; he has to make himself strong. So I'm like, okay, is this going to be like a Shonen Jump manga where it's like friendship, hard work, victory? And is this what we're working towards here? It seems simplified or something, or I don't know. It just that to me was the least interesting stuff about it. Is all that whole side of it is like, oh, Griffith has this dream, and it's all Guts is all about this too. He's like, I don't want to be in the shadow of Griffith's dream, that kind of thing. What is this? What is his dream really? I guess.
Well, I mean, it's been talked about in the previous volumes. I think it's not explained very clearly in this. It's just Griffith's dream.
I think it's to be the greatest of all, or something. Effectively.
I think, didn't he say he wanted to have his own kingdom?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's it. And I mean, it's funny because in a way it's sort of inspiring to see him working toward, attaining his goal. But on the other hand, it's kind of disconcerting because he'll do anything to keep advancing. It's really interesting because when he slept with that guy, because the whole time when Griffith says to Guts, I'm going to make you mine, or you're going to belong to me, or something like that, we were wondering, well, it sounds sexual, but what does he actually mean? Are we talking about dreams, like psychological states here, or what? And we've been wondering about Griffith's sexuality. And in this volume, it seemed like when he went into that room with that old dude, I was like, okay, it's very clear now. He's not heterosexual. At least. But then afterwards, it seems clear that he was doing it purely for power. Right, he has no feeling. This guy is crushing on him, who wants to do it again, and Griffith just it means nothing to him. Yeah,
so it's like, oh, maybe he's not. Maybe he is heterosexual and he's just doing it for power. And there's a couple of things like that flip-flop. And here, when we get Casca's whole speech about how she's staying with Griffith because she wants to be the sword that helps him achieve his dream, I'm like, oh, so her interest in him is not romantic, which is what I thought it was in a previous volume. But no, then we get this ball scene later on, and she wears this dress for the first time in her life, and she wants to dance with Griffith. So I'm like, oh, maybe it is romantic interest.
Yeah, it kind of bounces back and forth.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if sometimes I was like, I really like that it's bouncing back and forth, that I'm being kept on my toes as a reader. And then, kind of when I went through it again, I was like, do I like this? Or I wish she would choose a side and stick to it? Or is this the reason it's going for 40 volumes instead of 20? Because we're not getting clear answers about these things.
Yeah, well, then Judo, one of the other members of the Band of the Hawk, is saying, in order to keep pushing toward his dream, the only person he can marry is Princess Charlotte. So Casca doesn't have a chance with him, and so Guts, why don't you go for her? And and Guts is like, well, I wanted to talk about this too because it's Guts makes a lot of excuses about how he's not in love with Casca, and he just has to take care of himself at this point and all this. But I feel like a lot of it has to do with self-esteem and following on from the trauma that we saw him go through as a kid. And I think Miura's really got a strong hold on trauma and how it can affect a person. And so Guts is just seeing himself as a killing machine. He'll say it himself, the only thing I'm good at is swinging my sword. And so that's what I just keep doing. And he, at one point, kills 100 guys in one stand with no backup. So he just keeps doing what he thinks he's good at because he doesn't have the confidence to try to do something else, like go after a woman.
Yeah, agreed.
But so in that scene where she catches Griffith bathing after he sleeps with that guy, and he's explaining why he did it, and he starts digging his fingernails into his arm, and it's bleeding and
really deep.
Yeah,
like unnaturally deep.
Yeah. I mean, you'd think there might be muscle damage as bad as he was tearing up his arm. And that is never come back to in these two volumes. We never even see a bandage on his arm, let alone the same level of intensity from him I guess, but I wasn't quite sure what was going on there. Why was he digging into his arm like that?
Well, he's definitely feeling guilt. Like he feels dirty for for having prostituted himself.
Yeah, when he's talking about how the only way he can keep going is for the rest of the Band of the Hawk to lay down their lives for him, and maybe there's some guilt about that too.
Yeah, and then he ends up, when he kills that guy that he slept with. Yeah,
Gannon.
It's to keep him quiet. Or he says, I can't have people finding out, or something like that. He does say something
spreading
like that.
rumors.
So he feels unclean for sure, which is why he's bathing. He's very vulnerable in the scene, the way Miura draws him like hunched over and like, as you said, goring his fingernails into his arms. But I think he's supposed to be really consumed by guilt. It's maybe a bit melodramatic, the level of gore that's coming out of his arm.
Yeah. So the biggest event in these two volumes, then, kind of the central event of them, is when the Band of the Hawks go to battle against the delightfully named Holy Purple Rhino Knights.
Yeah, I love that. But what was the name of that army in the previous volume that had that really crazy long name?
They came up again in this one. Yeah, the Blue Whale Ultra Heavy Armored Fierce Assault Annihilation Knight Corps.
Yeah, I love that. But before we get to that battle, we've got like volume 7 is like there's like 100 pages of combat here. After they come out of the cave, we come out of this
Guts
long
and Casca.
flashback. They come out of the flashback, within flashback, they escape, and then the enemy army shows up, and there's like literally 100 pages of combat.
Yeah,
with very little plot going on. And I was like, okay, this is kind of we've forgotten about the palace intrigue now, but then that comes back, volume 8. Suddenly it like revolves around again. But yes, you're right. That's the main thing. But there's a little bit I was a bit confused about this. So there's this this location called Doldrey with a fort or a castle in it. And I was a little bit confused about who controls this castle. So there are two forces, right? There's Midlands, which is who the Band of the Hawk, our protagonists, are fighting for. And there's Tudor, which maybe was meant to sound like Tudor.
Well, I mean, if you look around online, you see them just called the Tudors on some pages. Maybe that's what was used in the anime. I'm not sure, but
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
in this translation, it's spelled Chudors.
Yeah.
The
So
Chudors.
at some stage, I guess this castle Doldrey was a Midlands
Hmm.
stronghold, but then it fell to Tudors, so now they're trying to retake it, something like that.
Yeah, I guess some time ago, like 100 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And then attempts to take it back have failed, and so Griffith says we can do it, and nobody believes him. They're laughing at him, but of course they do it.
They do it. You know what? I'll say another thing about this series. So when we go into flashback, there's a narrative problem because there's no threat to Guts. We know Guts is not going to get killed in any battle because we know he's alive. This is all a flashback.
And we know that Griffith is going to keep moving up because we've seen that he's in the Godhand.
Well, okay, I will say that I think that Griffith, all the tension for me came from the Griffith thing. Because for me, we know that Griffith has to become this interdimensional being at some stage. And maybe he has to die for that to happen. So actually, you're constantly like on tenterhooks. It's like waiting for Anakin Skywalker to turn into Darth Vader. The whole time I'm like, oh, they're going to poison him. Is this going to be when the turn happens? Is he going to be poisoned and killed? And then he's going to somehow enter the God Hand because he has the ballot, that little egg face magical charm thing. So there is tension with him, but there's no tension with Guts. And anytime, like every battle, some new giant guy shows up on the battlefield. And it's some hulking brute, and Guts cuts him in half, literally cuts him in half at the waist or in half down the middle or something, like that. It's every time it's the same thing. The plot depends on Guts being able to cut through anything all the time. There's never any tension with Guts' battles. And I guess we can enjoy the artwork or the way he's choreographed the fight, but I mean, come on, we're up to volume 8 of this stuff. We've seen it. So that kind of stuff was not so interesting to me. Well, and in terms of it being a flashback, it's interesting that we've deflated any tension with Guts and we've increased the tension with Griffith and how his transformation is going to happen.
Right. Well, it's interesting. As I was saying, like Griffith's rise and the Battle of Doldrey is kind of the central thing here, but it almost feels like Griffith is the main character because he's the one who's like got something to lose here. He's the one who's progressing, and Guts is just, the hired gun. And so thinking of like what you're saying, it makes sense that Miura then decides to have Guts leave the Band of the Hawk because he's sick of being in Griffith's shadow, both within the comic and for us as we're reading it, because he is in the shadow of Griffith because he doesn't really have any agency in the story.
Yeah. So end of volume 8, Guts leaves the band. So I'm really curious about. It's also interesting that he leaves after 3 years. He says he's been with them for 3 years, which is when we started the flashbacks, we had 3-year chunks. It was like every phase of his life was 3 years, and then the next thing would happen. So I thought that was an interesting little touch. But he leaves, and I'm really curious about where Volume 9 is going to go, because are we going to have two sides, like what's happening with Guts on one end and one with Griffith on the other, or are we just going to have Guts and then he comes back, he's going to be reunited with Griffith at a later stage?
Yeah, I'm imagining. I mean, I haven't taken a look at Volume 9 yet, but I'm imagining maybe there's a jump ahead in time, maybe, and then he happens across the Band of the Hawk again, or maybe there are some side stories where he's doing other stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
More discussion of Berserk in a moment, but first be sure to join us for 20th Century TV and music trivia quiz videos and more on our Patreon page. Patrons donating $4 a month or more get access to hours of additional podcasts. Get all the info at patreon.com/deconcomics.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin Podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin Podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
Yeah, so they have this giant battle at this castle Doldrey, this fortress, and they amazingly win with their small band of warriors.
Well, and reading it the second time, I started noticing more like Griffith's strategy. And, the enemy is like really puzzled by his strategy. Like, why are you putting your soldiers' backs to the river? Because it cuts off their escape route. Well, that turns out to be the point, because now the only way that they can survive is to keep fighting. Mm. If they go backwards into the river, they'll drown. So it's just a way of keeping them fighting for him, which is kind of Machiavellian.
Yeah. But it was also to draw the Tudor army away, because they thought they would have a sure kill when they were trapped at the river, and that way Casca was able to come in with her little battalion and take over the castle.
Under the cover of this dust storm, which Griffith says is part of the plans. Like, how did you arrange to have a dust storm?
Yeah.
Rubbed your magic lamp or something, and one of your wishes to the genie was a dust storm? I don't know. I don't know if the Picasso egg, whatever it's called, I've forgotten now, if that can...
The ballot.
Yeah, can grant a wish like that.
I hope that's what it turns out to be. Actually, that would be a cool little twist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after they win this battle, now the court, like, there's this group of conspirators that are like, well, this upstart is becoming too powerful. And
because Griffith's political power is rising, and
he's going to be promoted to general.
And the Band of the Hawk will all become knights.
Yeah, and they're really upset by this, but I'm like, why? This guy won an unwinnable battle for you. Actually, why not be grateful? Why do the people love him, but this conspiracy doesn't like him? Purely because he's of commoner blood, and they're all
I think they feel threatened by him, and they're saying like he's too low on the totem pole to know anything about governing. We're the only ones who know about governing, and so we got to get rid of him.
Yeah. So Minister Foss, who has previously been involved in scheming to get Griffith assassinated, has formed a new conspiracy, and he's convinced the Queen that Griffith murdered General Julius, who was the king's brother, and also we learn in this volume was actually the queen's lover as well.
Right, and that's actually true. He had Guts kill Julius and as it happened, his son, because his son was a witness. So that's actually correct.
That helps Griffith as well, unexpectedly, because that son would have married the princess. Mm-hmm. If he had survived. So somehow he had a stroke of luck there with him being accidentally killed as a bonus by Guts when that assassination was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they planned this whole plot to poison him.
Yeah, to poison him at this
I love when they come back,
reception.
They come back in glory after this massive battle. There's an interesting panel where Casca rides through the crowds on horseback, and all these ladies, this throng of ladies, is swooning over her. And it really reminded me, because I just read last week Rose of Versailles, where all the women are swooning over Lady Oscar, who is actually a woman. But it was very similar to that, I felt like Like, why all these ladies like? But Casca's not even like androgynous, I don't think. But it's really funny. Like the security, the other knights are having to hold all these women back from mobbing her, and she looks all embarrassed. And by the way, did you notice a very funny panel where one of the knights of the Band of the Hawk is like doing this pose, and we get a caption underneath that says Hulk Hogan?
What was that? What was the? I mean, I don't know wrestling. I was going to ask you. Maybe you understand what the reference is here.
Pose. It was his ring pose where he would like point one arm in the air. He'd like point with both arms, but one arm would be like on his chest and one would be in the sky. And then the little caption underneath it, Hulk Hogan. I loved it. It was a little like anachronous fourth wall break almost.
Yeah.
That little gag. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was kind of surprised how much humor there was in these. I mean, it wasn't a ton. It wasn't like Fullmetal Alchemist, but there were a number of kind of funny points, like where, well, there's this guy called Adon who's like all bandaged up. I think they fought him in the previous volume, and he encounters with him are kind of played for comedy, and Casca makes some really funny cartoony faces when she runs into him, and of course those names of those military groups, and let's see. Oh, yeah, when in one place where she encounters Adon, and she surprises him because she's fighting so much better than she was at the end of Volume 6, and she says, she hints that it was her time of the month, and he shouts out, "What? Are you telling me you were on your period?" She says, "Don't shout it." And then what I really loved about that was one of the other Hawks says, "Oh, it was her period." Like, that's kind of private information. So it wasn't even known among the rest of the Hawks exactly what was going on. And so there's kind of a, penny drop moment there. And I like the kind of realism of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I liked, I don't know if it was intended as a joke or not, but that guy who's all bandaged up, what did you say his name was?
Adon.
Adon. So he says he's going to torture Guts and Casca using something called the 100-year convulsive death, which has been passed down in his family for 200 years. So if it's 100-year torture and they've passed it down for 200 years, does that mean they've done it twice? Or how does this work exactly? Does that mean they've done it to a lot of people and it lasted for 100 years on those people? But I don't know. I just thought it was a funny little thing. I don't know if it was meant to be.
I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah. Another thing I really noticed in these two volumes, art-wise, was, and I guess I forgot or I've just been taking it for granted, is Miura's really great at drawing faces of lots of different people. He's not like a lot of cartoonists where you have shorthand, like you have to draw fast. He's not like John Byrne where you draw the same face again and again and again because you just got to pump out these pages, or even Jack Kirby has like a recognizable face, or all those artists. But Miura really gives everyone, and there's a lot of scenes with like a lot of counselors or all those conspirators, and everyone has a different distinctive face. It's really pretty amazing in comics in general to see any cartoonist make that kind of effort to distinguish all those people and make them all look different and do the work of designing them all. And another thing I noticed too this time, which he's probably been doing all along, but I didn't notice for the previous 7 volumes, was sometimes when he does like an establishing shot, like when they're in a tavern or something, the panel is quite small. Instead of being really long, like a lot of cartoonists would do, is have a really large, here's the castle that they're in or whatever. He'll just make it really small because it's not that important, and he'll immediately move into the conversation that people are having inside it, which I thought was really good. And I hadn't noticed him doing it before. But, it was probably there before.
I guess we didn't finish talking about the plot to kill Griffith, because... because Griffith apparently just intuits that there's a plot without having any actual information.
No, actually, this was a panel that I specifically noticed early on. There's a panel when Minister Foss was conspiring with General Julius. There's a scene where
Yeah, they flash
silent
back
scene
to that
where
here.
Griffith is looking down the hall at him, and then he just stares at him with this look like, I know what you're up to. It's amazing because, again, there's no dialogue. Miura just draws this look on Griffith's face and a look of fear on Foss's face. So you know that he's kind of figuring something out. So yeah, he's got this band of spies that he's put on him and has figured out that this big conspiracy is happening. So when he's poisoned, you think he's dead because he keels over.
Mm-hmm.
And then the conspirators, including the queen, all meet back in their little den.
Yeah, way up on a high level of this castle. And yeah, Foss is there, but he leaves. And then as they're like congratulating themselves, then smoke starts coming up through the floorboards and the whole castle is on fire and Griffith is standing alive down below looking up at them.
Yeah.
And he somehow has a conversation with the queen from all that distance over the roar of the flames about how he figured it out. Yeah, it reminded me of that scene in the first Shazam movie where they parody this kind of thing with the hero and the villain so far apart and somehow they're trying to have a conversation.
I think, though, he has most of the conversation with Foss, who's next to him. He's the one he really... Because Foss asked him, how did you figure it out?
Well, yeah, that's a little bit later after all the conspirators are dead in the
yes, and the poisoner has been killed by Guts in disguise. I don't know if we were supposed to not know that this was Guts. It seemed very obvious to me that Guts was.
Oh yeah, I didn't even look like much of a disguise to me. I mean, that's obviously Guts.
He's wearing a hat, and his face is a little bit covered. And I'm like, yeah, that's Guts.
Yeah, and then that's a clue to us that, Griffith knew this was going to happen, because otherwise why is Guts standing out there outside the castle ready to kill them?
You would assume that the person that kills the poisoner would be somebody that Foss hired, and you don't think that Foss would hire Guts to kill the poisoner. So, yeah, something is kind of going on there.
Yeah, maybe Miura was kind of hoping that the reader would not realize that was Guts and that the guy was working for Foss, because when Foss tells the other conspirators that server has been eliminated, they're all like, okay, that's a good job, Foss. You got rid of him.
Wait a second, you're right. So why did Foss think that?
Well, Foss somehow knew about it like after the fact.
Or Foss hired a guy to kill the poisoner, and then Griffith knew that and got Guts to kill the assassin first.
I mean, Griffith, we find out later, Griffith has blackmailed Foss into helping him turn the plot against the plotters, because there's a point where Foss gets this letter and he's shocked by it, and we don't know what it says, but apparently it was from Griffith saying, I know what you're trying to do, and I've kidnapped your daughter, and so you have to help me now. And so they get the poison switched to kind of a Romeo and Juliet style, almost poison, that makes Griffith appear dead, and then the conspirators think that he's gone, and then after it's too late, they find out he's not. And so then everybody in the hall, including the Band of the Hawk, all think that Griffith is dead too, except for Guts. Guts has been waiting around because he knew this was going to happen. He mentions something's going to happen before it actually happens. Mentions to us, not to anybody else. So, by doing this, Griffith ends up, eliminating the rest of his competition, basically. It just kind of eases the way to keep moving up, and probably marry Princess Charlotte, and she's also crushing on him. I don't know how he feels about her. It might just be another stepping stone to him.
I think that's my feeling about it. We haven't had any indication that he cares about anyone beyond them fighting for him. Yeah, it's hard to tell. Maybe the members of the Band of the Hawk, or and Casca, or maybe he sees them also as a way to keep moving up. So it's hard to tell if he really cares about anybody. Well, but then again, there's that whole scene with the little kid on the battlefield that opened Volume 7 with the toy soldier, and what are we supposed to make of that? Because he denies that he was moved by that kid to sleep with the old creep. So I don't know. I don't know. I think he does kind of care about them, but I think my sense currently in Volume 8 is that he would kill them if it would help him get further up or eliminate them in some way.
Yeah, if he had...
Because we haven't mentioned that the spies that he hired to follow all these people around so he knew the conspiracy was happening, or the guys that he hired to kidnap...
Or those elderly women who were taking care of the daughter. He then
kills all of them.
Guts kills all of them, too. Yeah. Just trying to, eliminate anyone who could possibly finger Griffith later. And sure enough, they're talking about how they're going to be able to blackmail him with this information. So, Griffith was apparently right to think that they needed to be out of the way to keep his secret safe. But, it's just, he's just merciless.
Yeah. And we get a caption that says the truth vanished into the darkness, which is exactly...
right,
about the plot. It's just gone.
Except for Foss and Guts, nobody knows what happened, so it just disappears.
Yeah.
And there are rumors about some third party might have done it or something, but that's just all gone.
Yeah. And then when Guts Guts is like, well, I'm done, I'm leaving the Hawk, and then he has to have a duel with Griffith. Griffith won't let him leave without a fight, and it's really like suddenly we get like 2 chapters that are like a martial arts manga, where you're even getting like visions of what will happen if he slices this way or that kind of stuff. And it's all just like internal monologuing about how should I attack and this, that, or whatever. It really goes deep into that for basically 2 chapters. That is joust, and he wins, and then he walks away, and it's kind of a better. It's an interesting place to end it. It ended right at the end of the volume, which is like a perfect solving point.
Which hasn't always been the case with this manga. Sometimes it cuts off in really odd places. Well, I remember I think our first Berserk episode we did 1 through 4, and 4 ended in such an awkward place that I went ahead and read 5 just because we're gonna end there.
And 5. So the one where we get Casca's flashback in the cave ended, and then we start the next volume. Volume 7 starts. We're still in her flashback about her backstory, and it's just like 1 or 2 chapters of that.
And I assume that the Japanese volumes are the same. Yeah. So we can't blame the translation.
No, they're trying to keep it at 225 pages.
Yeah,
obviously.
Uncompromisingly.
10 chapters, uncompromisingly, when sometimes 11 or 9 would be better.
Yeah, it's really odd sometimes. But 8 ends in a really good place. It feels like the end of something there because Guts is leaving.
Yes. And I definitely want to know what happens next.
Yeah.
Whereas in the middle of Casca's flashback, I was like, how many volumes is this flashback within a flashback going to go for? I was really not so sure about it.
Yeah, and then probably have her talking with Griffith, and then Griffith going into a flashback, and then a flashback in that one. But so how do you think Casca really feels about Griffith? Because it said that she worships him, or that she's in love with him, or... Yeah,
it's very back and forth. Like I said, after the first flashback in this volume, I was like, oh, she admires his dream to be a conqueror. And then the ball happened, and I was like... And she was in that gown, and I was like, oh, so she's romantically interested. And then Judo suggests to Guts that are you interested in Casca? I was like, oh... Is this going to go that way, maybe? Is she interested in him? Or don't have any sense of that. I think she's... I don't know. And like I said, last episode, when she's rescued by Griffith, it seems like, she thinks of him as like a big brother. Like a protective figure. Like even almost a father figure or a big brother figure. Something like that. And now I really do not know. And I... hope we get some sort of answers.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting to see in these 2 volumes how her relationship with Guts changes, because she still kind of dislikes him at the beginning of 7, but by the end, there does seem like a non-zero chance that she could get together romantically with him, or that she would want to.
Right. But mostly because somebody else has put the idea into his head, maybe. I don't know. She's very upset about him leaving the band. Not sure. Maybe because she thinks that if he leaves, it will reduce Griffith's ability to achieve Griffith's dream.
You could argue that, I guess, but it seems like she's really come to like Guts. I don't know about love, but certainly like. But yeah, I think I enjoyed these 2 volumes the most of any so far in the series. Maybe.
Okay. I'm still in love with the craziness of the first 2.
Well, yeah, it was good, but maybe I've just kind of forgotten that because it seems so long ago.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. That's the other thing, is like, how are we going to get back to that world of like nonstop demon fighting? What's going to happen that's going to cause that? What actually is the Godhand? How do you join it? All those deep questions, plot questions, have got to be. I mean, we're into volume 8 now, and like I said, that means we're technically a fifth of the way through what Miura drew before he passed away. So, come on! And we had this. Like I said, volume 7 was 100 pages of fighting with no plot development. If he keeps going at this pace, I really wonder if we're going to get these answers.
Yeah, it's not paced like your average flashback. It's paced like it's the story, which is what it feels like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, why is there so much more supernatural in the present of the story? I mean, is it just because he decided to do it that way, or is there an actual event that makes things more magical?
I hope it has something to do with, if I was writing it, it would be like, because Griffith does some supernatural thing and becomes a supernatural being and joins the Godhand, somehow the Godhand's influence is going to cause a lot of darkness in the world, all that supernatural darkness. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, although, I mean, as we've seen, there's no magic in the world of the flashback, so it's kind of curious. It's just like it's off stage, or there's less of it, or... And
the other thing I'm really worried about is, are we ever going to get the origin of the ballad? We only know that he bought it from a traveling gypsy. Are we going to find out how it was made, or where it came from, or how the gypsy got it, or any of that stuff?
Right. Well, and he has that already, right? That was part of the flashback.
Yeah.
And we didn't see it at all in these 2 volumes.
No.
And I was expecting
saved his life once,
I was expecting that was what was going to save him from the poisoning, but it wasn't.
Excellent point. Yeah. No, it saved him from the arrow.
I mean, it's almost like Miura forgot about it.
It saved him from the arrow in the previous volume. He almost got killed by it, and it took the shot. So, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, definitely looking forward to volume 9.
Yeah.
Berserk by Kentaro Miura is published by Dark Horse. Kumar is the co-host of the podcast Comic Book Movie Oblivion, about relatively obscure movies based on comics. If you're enjoying our comics discussion every week, consider supporting this podcast by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics, and go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on what used to be Twitter, on Facebook, where we have both a page and a group, or on YouTube. Via our site, you can also shop on Amazon to support the show and find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode there, or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. That's also the address for submitting your own comics work for possible inclusion on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Next week, from the pages of 2000 AD, Kumar and Dana discuss Alan Moore and Ian Gibson's The Ballad of Halo Jones, recently repackaged in a color omnibus edition. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.